Ladies and gentlemen, I hope this is as cathartic for you as it certainly will be for me. Today, I'm making an attempt at breaking some of you from your doomer negative feedback loops. Plus, I also got a whole lot of pressure built up because a whole lot of folks need to be yelled at for the current state of gaming. I used to be in the same position as most of you, blind to the possibilities of a brighter future. It is a miserable spot to be, completely reasonable, but miserable nonetheless. You see, our brains really enjoy engaging with this behavior called negativity bias. That means bad events on average will have more mental impact than the good ones. It's basically a mechanic that we evolved to avoid repeating mistakes like eating at Arby's. Fortunately, in this circumstance, it can be dissuaded with a bit of critical thinking. I know that's hard for some of you, but bear with me, we'll get more into that later. Let's take a step back and look at the situation at hand. And I would like to say this early, this is going to sound worse before it sounds better, so give it some time to breathe. You are likely here because you feel most major game studios are churning out uninspired and lazy garbage. Honestly, I'll give you that point all day, I almost wholeheartedly agree. But why is that? Well, you see, most companies that own these studios are beholden to ancient lumps of coal known as shareholders. Shareholders demand profit over everything else because they are devoid of souls. You know, it's funny I mentioned souls and whatnot. I got a phone call recently about a Sony executive having a heart attack. Now, I immediately wrote it off because I found it rather hard to believe, as they would need to have a heart to begin with, but I digress. Shareholders only care about the studio making money. The cheaper and less labor-intensive, the better. If the company can get away with underpaying or even firing people, that is ideal for the shareholders. Keep in mind, shareholders don't play video games. They don't understand the value of a large, experienced development team. They think these are all interchangeable cogs in a machine. They are clueless about the subject matter and would prefer everything be ran on a skeleton crew. Here are some ways that greed transfers over into your games. Microtransactions, which involve just about anything with an in-game shop. FOMO time-limited battle passes, cosmetic items, even some pay-to-win mechanics here and there. Overpricing that removes the micro portion of microtransaction, rushing so features come out unfinished, and an unwillingness to promote creativity because it's not part of a cookie-cutter mold. Feel free to add more to this list in the comments. I just have to keep progressing this video or I will be on this portion all day. Oftentimes, the talking heads for these studios will cite an intention to better fund the development team as the reason for an uptick in microtransactions. I am all for developers being paid what they are worth, but we all know this money is not ending up in the hands of the developers making the product. I'll put it in service industry terms. Corporations are the douchebag managers who pull the waitstaff tips, take the cut they mistakenly believe they earned, and then distribute the rest of the money back to the staff. Most developers realize $20, the price for a whole-ass indie game, is ridiculous for a single cosmetic edition, all the same as we do. The problem here is the upper echelon of major gaming studios such as Ubisoft, EA, Activision. They aren't playing these games, they aren't experiencing this, and even if they did, they wouldn't care about microtransactions because their pockets are so lined. The only metric that matters to those people is profit, and unfortunately, they calculate that by thinking how much money can we make with the least amount of work. The answer to which is release the same game every 2 years with an upgraded and overpriced shop feature. Some of you don't even know what it was like before, and I don't know if it's better to be blissfully ignorant or aware and pissed off about the current state of gaming. I suppose I'll have to watch The Matrix a few more times. Here's what happens now. The cycle will go from good news to bad news, and then back to good news that outweighs all of the bad news. I'm splitting it up because the second half is the other reason for failure, but it is kind of unrelated and I don't want things to get messy. So good news part 1. Remember when I told you about negativity bias at the beginning of this? That's what happens when you look at modern games. You remember the catastrophic releases or the falls from grace, but you forget the positives. It doesn't even need to be an apocalypse-level failure. If it's not worth a damn, you remember that event. You probably heard about it somewhere and it just stuck with you. The good games, on the other hand, don't stick in your memory, even though there's been tons of them, and you've probably played a fair bit. Let's look at it this way. For every Assassin's Creed Shadows, there is a Monster Hunter Wilds, and although it may seem bleak, it's actually fairly balanced. Luckily for you, it doesn't end there in terms of game selection. Sure, games by enormous companies are always going to hit the headlines first, but independent developers are creating relatively cheap and entertaining games, a dime a dozen these days. Every week we end up getting a new superstar coming to light, whether it be Repo, Lethal Company, Helldivers, and your donation to those people actually means something. Not only that, we are pretty far into this video game timeline. You don't always need to play the most recently released pile of fuck if you don't want to. There are piles among piles of catalogs catering to whatever it is that you may want out of your games. If the new stuff isn't appealing, those old options you never had time for are still right there waiting for you. So in summary of the first half, yes, corporate greed is a bitch, but for the most part we're actually breaking up with her. We have now arrived at part 2 of why big games are flopping, and I'm about to get aggressively animated as well as aggressively opinionated. I need to tell you beforehand, I detest both sides of this argument as I do most extreme and ridiculous behaviors, so I'm crashing out and making enemies with everybody. A lot of games are getting smoked in public perception over this ridiculous woke versus anti-woke culture war bullshit. Here's the cycle. Studio releases a game that plays like shit, but it's got a diverse cast of characters. The game gets reviewed by players as shitty because it plays bad, and then journalists really don't like that. Why not? Because they are blatantly in league with these game studios. It's a symbiotic relationship. They get exclusive access in exchange for favorable reviews, and when you say, hey, this game is a piece of shit and their review is rather positive, they take it as a personal attack upon themselves. So the game journalists go ahead and say, hey, this game is good, everyone review bombing it does it because the main character is of a certain demographic, and to be fair, there were instances where racist people make racist statements like the dickheads that they are, but these editorials have a consequence for their generalizations. Those articles often paint any unsatisfied players as bigoted or prejudiced for not enjoying a poorly made game. Here's a little something about people. They don't like it when you falsely label them in the same group as uneducated, awful pricks. One more thing about people, if you spend enough time pressing someone and calling them a bigot when they are not, well, they sure as shit will be soon. You can call a racist all day. They won't care. They already knew that. They might even take pride in it. But if you do it to someone who isn't time and time again, you just created a massive problem. They will eventually throw up their hands and say, screw it, if you're constantly labeling me as this, I might as well be, and now we have a cascade of issues. When pushed to that extreme, these people get blinded by their rage. Now when they see a perfectly fine game with a black female lead, they will immediately lose their shit because the last time they saw something similar, they got gaslit into being a complete dickhead. And now they're just a loud dickhead screaming DEI hire at anything diverse regardless of the quality to get back at people. And now that cycles all the way back to the developers. They end up suffering the same fate that the first batch of dickheads got. They think, oh, you want to call me woke, you want to call me slurs, fine. I'll put stuff in my game just to piss you off. And from there, tensions just get strained further and further. More people acting in bad faith are amassed as time goes on, it gets more politically charged, and now we're here. All because a few game journalists and a grand total of 3 genuine bigots couldn't shut the hell up on Twitter. I got a question. What the dick ever happened to some good old nuance? You know what? No, not even nuance. What happened to not really giving a shit? Look at Eastern Studios. They don't give one good goddamn, and they are conquering the industry. Tencent is literally having a Genghis Khan level generational run right now over gaming. You want to know how they tackle politics and identity in those games? They don't talk about it, and if it's brought up to them, they proceed to not talk about it. They're too busy making quality games to care about what dipshits once again on Twitter have to say about them. Now, sure, they may have a sweatshop or two, but that's just how she goes. It's the risk you gotta be willing to take. Now, this next part is good depending on your vindictive nature or lack thereof. Personally, I'm a big fan because I am an absolute vengeful bitch with an amazing slutty waist, but that's besides the point. These big companies are failing, and it does not take long for a ship to go down. It took 1 year for Ubisoft to hit a pothole and then hit an otherworldly nosedive and get purchased by Tencent. Point being, if you make too many objectively bad games, regardless of optics, you are not long for this ecosystem. This is a capitalist market, sunshine. You swim or you get your dick and balls taken by the piranhas. It's only a matter of when. I stand by saying any major game studio can crumble after having seen what's happened lately. Anyway, if you want to, join the gaming Discord server in the description. Have a good night.